I think there's no doubt that all tasks that we know that are flexible, that are what we like to call high mix, low volume, will soon be possible to automate.
With National Robotics Week on the horizon, we are thrilled to have a special guest who's at the forefront of this dynamic industry. Anders Beck is not your typical robotics expert with a background as an elite competitive swimmer turned robotics PhD. He now leads strategy and innovation at Universal Robots, a global leader in robotics technology innovation. We dive deep into the world of robotics, exploring everything from concerns around jobs displacement to the widespread integration of robotics in people's homes. We'll also uncover why Denmark boasts the highest concentration of robotics companies globally and how recent simultaneous advancements in generative AI and robotics are set to potentially revolutionize many sectors and many industries. It's always a joy to speak with an absolute expert in their field, and Anders definitely fits this description, and I'm sure you'll find our conversation as enlightening as I did. Without further ado, let's welcome Anders Beck. Anders, thank you so much for agreeing to come on the Tech Leaders podcast. How are you today in Denmark?
Oh, I'm great. It's nice to be here.
Let's just jump straight in. The question we always ask our guests to kick these interviews off: what does good leadership mean to you, Anders?
I'd say, first of all, for me, leadership is probably one of the most ingredients for having a good work life, to actually feeling accomplished, to feeling that what you do as an individual is both appreciated, but also sort of guided towards the right outcomes. So to me, good leadership is really inspirational. It really sort of provokes the right kind of thoughts. But of course, it also sort of pushes you a little bit against delivering the right things. I mean, to me, having a work life where accomplishing results is really the key thing, right? I think having a lot of hard work is one thing, but as soon as it actually yields in results, things you can be proud of, things you're happy about when you go home from work, that's what makes everything worth it, right? And having the right kind of a leadership that pushes you towards those kind of results, that challenges you, that motivates you, appreciate you in the end is the key thing, right? So I really strive to do that in my leadership, to motivate my teams against really accomplishing the goals they set out to do, challenging them towards sort of getting the right things. But I'm much more passionate about making sure that I can pave the way for people so I can keep them running, right? If they run a few degrees out of course, that's fine. As long as they're running, then we can sort of navigate our way together towards the final goal. But I think having teams that feel they cannot move forward, or feel blocked one way or another, or demotivated and so on is challenging for culture. It's challenging for the individual well-being. So I'm really a huge fan of a culture where you're moving forward, where things are changing, where you're sort of delivering on the goals that you set out to do. I think that's really the key things about leadership, is really to motivate things to go in that direction.
Yeah, motivate, innovate. This is what I'm getting from what you said. Motivate, innovate, and just keep moving forward and always be progressive, I suppose, yeah? And then people want to follow you, don't they? It's natural that people are going to want to follow someone with those attributes, because that's what leadership is all about, isn't it? So that's a fantastic answer. So look, obviously for the listeners who are not so familiar with yourself, I know obviously you've got a PhD in robotics. You're an ex-national team elite swimmer in Denmark. And obviously you've grown a career within technology and specifically robotics and automation since then. Can you give the listeners a bit of an introduction to yourself, just an overview of your career?
Absolutely. So I began my early career in academia and university, actually doing it as a dual career together with my period in elite sports, which of course were challenging days. It was like 35 hours of training every week, 100 days of traveling every year.
Did you have to start really early in the morning as well?
I was diving into the pool at 6 a.m. in the morning.
Why do swimmers always do that? They always do it really early in the morning for some reason.
but it's pretty hard to fit in two or three training sessions in a day unless you start really early. But I've asked myself that question many times too. I really enjoy that, actually, having that balance between focusing on sort of doing sports, which is again back to being performance centric, being sort of really having to deliver on the things, and then of course also having the creative academic career that I also had. Through the university days, I did a lot. I sort of drove forward the whole design process. I was at the Technical University of Denmark. There was a robotic systems engineering group, and I really built a lot of the foundational building blocks for doing the robotic systems there. Learned how difficult it actually was to not only to get all the technologies to come together in the robots, but also make them do real things. Like, how do you plan missions? How do you sort of plan for redundancies? What if things fail? And I mean, 20 years ago, a lot of things failed in robotics. So how do you
I can imagine,
how do you build those robust systems that really solves real world problems? That's always been a passion of mine, to both bring together technology, but also sort of make it solve real problems. So when I went into my PhD, my doctorate, my focus was on mobile robots. After I left university, I moved to the Danish Technological Institute, which is an applied research institute. It's also privately held, so it was a company doing a lot of both like funded research, European research projects, but also a lot of consultancy, a lot of support amongst manufacturing companies. It could be technology companies and so on. And I was there for 8 years building a whole business side. Started from doing project management on areas which are all about easy robot programming, easy robot deployment. And that was really my focus area for those 8 years, where I sort of moved from managing projects, owning and running a small business unit. And in the end, I was responsible for the whole industrial robotics segment at the Danish Technological Institute. But the key challenges we really kept running into, and it was probably unique to the Danish industry, is the Danish industry does not have a lot of high volume industry. We have a lot of sort of fairly medium-sized businesses. And often, as Denmark is, the kind of products that often come out of Denmark is fairly sort of high value products. They're often fairly customized, design centric, and so on. So the key challenges that manufacturers have in Denmark is like, how do we automate these processes where the goods that come out have to be of really good quality? It may not be of the same volumes as is known from countries that have automotive industry, where countries with automotive industries like Germany, they have both the automotive, but they also have a lot of sub-suppliers that are all really focused on high volumes, fairly long longevity of the products. Well, the problem we saw in Denmark was, well, you're doing a product and you may not know if this product will be a product in 2 years, but you still have to do it of really high quality, and you really have to automate those processes. So that was really been the key problem I've been working on, both from a technology point of view, working with a lot of smaller manufacturers. We also worked a lot with Bosch, Siemens, a lot of the big industrial players that were struggling with the exact same problem. Because one thing is having high volume manufacturing in the center of a factory, but there's a ton of peripheral tasks where you still have people doing pre-development or doing a small batch, or maybe they have a certain business condition that somehow leads to it, and you need to do a small manufacturing batch of another variant or a different thing. So it was pretty clear to me that the key challenge of adopting robotics from today, or from that past, where it was all the high volume, very, very robust, very, very repetitive processes. Well, there's pretty good recipes today and back then to automate that. But getting to the kind of automation where either you could not afford these big installations, or maybe you would want the flexibility, the agility in your manufacturing to sort of be similar to what humans could do. Well, there was still a big gap. So that was really the focus of the work we did. And 6 years ago, I was approached by Universal Robots and saying, hey, this is amazing work you do. Why don't you come with us and do the same thing, help making robots even more approachable and deployable in the world. So for the last 6 years, I've been with Universal Robots doing exactly that.
So Denmark is obviously becoming a very strong hotspot. Why do you think that is, and how has that come about?
Well, it's an amazing story, actually, because it dates more than 30 years back. The city of Odense, in particular, had a very big steel shipyard, building the big container ships for Maersk.
Because shipping is the other big industry coming out of Denmark, isn't it? Obviously, Maersk are one of the biggest companies.
It is. Maersk is sort of a global leader in shipping, right? And of course, they had a lot of the ships 30 years ago, or almost 40 years ago now, manufactured locally in Denmark. But they also were seeing the growth of competition from the Far East, that that the shipyards were moving there. The cost competitiveness there was a growing challenge. So actually, Maersk decided to invest strategically in robotic automation and shipbuilding already in the 80s, starting even at the shipyard to drive robotic processes, figuring out like, could we do all the welding processes with robots? Even 20 years ago, gave the largest private donation to create an institute at the local university for robotics. So that even back then created that ecosystem where there was a lot of great minds coming out of the universities that really had that focus around robotics. And because there was robotic activities in the shipyard, it actually spun out a number of businesses as well.
So were these basic robots that were basically like unloading, shipping containers from ships?
It was primarily focusing on the manufacturing process of shipping. So it was primarily welding, because that's really the labor-intensive process when building ships. So it was a lot, but even welding created, especially like 25, 30 years ago, there was a lot of technologies that did not exist yet. Like, how do you plan the robot motions? How do you control these robots in real time to when you're welding these huge structures that they're sort of bending while the heat heats them up and all that, which is not a problem for any manual welder, but it's a huge challenge for robotics. So all of those sensor-based things were not yet solved. So the institute grew. There was an ecosystem of business-centric people that sort of came out of the universities, was exposed to the real world of robotics and manufacturing and so on. And that even 20, 25 years ago created this spiral of sort of business innovation, people coming out, new businesses started. And it was absolutely too early because there was a handful of robotic startups created like 20, 25 years ago out of this shipyard industry, which was simply too early of its day. Some of the things that are happening in welding today was what they did 25 years ago. And I think the other pivotal point for the city of Odense was there was this slowly forming robotic industry. Few other successful companies, such as the mobile industrial robot doing AMRs, logistics robots, also started at the same period. And then Teradyne came and acquired Universal Robots for $285 million. And I think that was for the industry back then, where everybody was, well, this is nice. I wonder where this is going, till actually turning into this multi-$100 million acquisition that was sort of moving to people that they knew from this ecosystem that actually created this company. That was sort of a pivotal moment where people realized, wow, we're not playing around anymore. This is actually a real business. This is actually growing. And then by the acquisition of mobile industrial robots a couple of years later, really sort of spiraled this, starting to pull in technical expertise. Today, we're recruiting from all over the world. People are pulled in. We have today the city of Odense also manifested like an ecosystem growth community, a growth sort of a function called Odense Robotics that supports growth in the area too. So today, I think we are around 8,000 people working in the robotic industry in the city of Odense alone.
Wow. It must be the biggest employer in the area by quite some distance then.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, it's the industry as a whole, because there's more than 160 companies working in robotics. It's startups, it's sub-suppliers to companies like Universal Robots.
I wanted to ask you about the collaborative part of building robots. I know you guys talk about cobots. I'm not sure if that's something you've trademarked or it's just a term that you use, but obviously cobots being collaborative robots. And I'm guessing in order to achieve collaborative robots, you've probably learned a lot about the mechanics of human beings and the psychology of human beings as well. You probably learned more about humans than you have about robots, I suppose. Yeah. Can you tell us about what you guys at Universal Robots, what drives you and what you're trying to build? What is the raison d'etre of your product development, purpose?
Absolutely. So I think the mission for Universal Robots is really to create a world where people work with robots and not like robots.
Yeah.
And I think it's actually fairly well explaining challenge we're facing, right? That I think over the industrial revolutions, we've seen that things have been more and more automated, more and more mechanized, which really have led to that people working in factories today do way more repetitive work than ever before, because they're tending, servicing machines and so on. And at the same time, we have this younger generation that today are excited about creating things, co-creating. The younger generations today, they're really looking for this meaning of the purpose of life. They're what they can do, how they are using their creative skills, which is actually a challenge for even attracting young talent to manufacturing in the future. When you think about a collaborative robot or a cobot, which was actually coined, I think, about 20 years ago, out of some research on co-creating, it also leans to the safety standards where you talk about collaborativeness as a way of having shared space between robots and people. But there's actually no real technical definition saying what is a cobot or collaborative robots as such. When we think about a collaborative robot, it is really to solve those manufacturing or technical robotic challenges where it needs the simplicity. So the mantra of universal robots have also always been it has to be easy to program, has to be really fast to deploy, and has to be safe to be around. And if you can have a system as whole that fulfills those criteria, then it can become that tool of people. Because today people still see robotics as the barrier. When we ask our customers, 38% of them will say, well, whatever I do, it's not suitable for robots because the lot sizes are too small, there's too much variability, there's too much flexibility. But in reality, the technology have now progressed so much, that's 100% possible. So often it is perceived challenges more than it's real technical challenges, more accessible, more approachable, and more solution focused for our customers. And that has to mean that collaborative is, of course, on the technical side, but collaborative is also about taking technologies partners and bringing them together, because in the end, we need to have full robot solutions that solves real world problems. And that's not just about a robot arm. It's also putting the right tools on the arm, having the right software. And that software cannot be very generic. That software needs to be, if it's a welding robot, it needs to be speaking the language of the people that needs to use it.
Yeah.
So I think the biggest learnings that we've had is that it's all about that application that the robot does. And it's all about having a very strong platform that makes the creators of applications, really empowers them to put in the domain knowledge into the systems, and then supporting that whatever product comes out in the end is really a system that is easy to use, and really delivering on those value propositions. I think one of the common misconceptions about robots is that in so many other things, when we are introducing new technologies, we are quite adamant about the training needed to adopt it, that being our new IT systems or new processes in companies and so on. And of course, bringing in automation to companies also requires a bit of different ways of working. It requires some training to understand, to operate the machinery, and especially as it becomes collaborative technologies where often operators or at least internal staff in companies will be the ones with the daily interaction with the robots, but they may need to readjust the robot, they may need to deploy the robot to new operations, new tasks. Of course, it requires internalization of the technology, where you build up new skills, and you build up sort of those new ways of working. But interestingly enough, this is exactly what our younger generations are asking for.
Sure. So I've seen, well, I've read about actually, but I've seen on YouTube and places like that, robots performing very complex surgical procedures, okay? Things like cataract surgery. Can you maybe, for the listeners, give us a couple of different case studies that you're most excited about, where collaborative robots, supplementing what surgeons are doing and things like that potentially use cases of robots that would become popular over the next 10 or so years?
Absolutely. So we are seeing robots, and I start saying there's a little bit of gap from the robots we see in industry to what we see in surgical, both from a certification point of view and so on. That is different things. But even in so many other applications, I think what we are seeing is, especially within logistics, we know that the e-commerce is growing so fast, and sorting, distribution has historically been a very, very manual and very labor-intensive process. With the latest emergence of AI that makes it much easier to identify packages, to sort them, to handle them, we're seeing robotics within logistics growing very, very fast. Another interesting domain is actually welding. And you might think that welding has been around, with robotic welding, has been around for a couple of decades, and that's absolutely true. But it's until very recently been a very specialized sort of area for expert robot welders. There was a long training. Today, you can use robots like ours, where the welding systems are so mature, so that you would have easy-to-use software that speaks the exact language of welders. You will have hardware that is sort of already defined, is put together. So you can have a quote tomorrow saying, hey, I want a robot cell over here to help me weld. And you would be told exactly what the price is. You would be known, hey, I'll kind of come in on Monday to install it for you. I'm going to train your employees, going to set a whole thing up, which means that an experienced welder will be welding manually in the morning, and in the afternoon, he will be a robot welder instead. He could still be training the robot. He could be preparing all the parts, but his productivity will be significantly higher because now he can use all that welding experience in telling the robot exactly where to weld, getting it going, and then he can continue getting the next job set up, which at least pulls the experts away of this very hard and manual processes.
So the brain of the expert is still in charge of the procedure, but 100%. The actual procedure is being carried out not by his arm, but by an external metal arm that he is controlling or she is controlling. Okay, I understand. So what do you say to the concern around jobs displacement, essentially? Okay, well, what do you say to that, Anders?
It's a discussion that's been around for robots also for decades. And I think the truth, and every statistic support this, there's no ever statistic that denies this, that this is an evolution of labor rather than it's a displacement or a change, right? If we keep to the welding topic, today there's a massive shortage of skilled welders in the world. In the US, there's more than 375,000 open jobs for welders.
That's crazy, isn't it?
Because it is crazy.
It's such an old vocation. I mean, welders have been around since ancient times. Why, you'd expect there to be more trained. Well, that's completely bizarre. Yeah. I mean, I'm assuming it's a training issue or something.
It is a training, but it's a lack of. I think there's a generational challenge, right? There's absolutely we've been driving more of the younger generations towards higher educations. So we are seeing less and less of our young people seeking in vocational directions.
Yeah, blue collar work is becoming less fashionable, essentially, isn't it? Which is sad.
I think there was a recent study last year that showed that moving a career within manufacturing was the second least attractive career path for young people. So I think we need to spin this around, and then because as I said before as well, manufacturing has also come from a place where it was a craft. Being in manufacturing, and you would actually sort of you were a trained craft person that did amazing things with your hands, to now being more and more repetitive. So we need to get manufacturing back into a place where you actually are trained, you're actually deploying your skills, but you're working with robots, right? You're sort of not the person staffing and managing and operating a machine. You're actually deploying your skills with more automated, more intelligent tools that you've ever done before. And I think the good thing is this is all supported by the unions. These are all supported by everyone realizes that, hey, this is the way we have to go. And it's actually getting manufacturing back into a place where there's trained skills. So it's all about thinking about manufacturing as probably a place where we also need to raise the bar on a bit of the education we give.
Yeah, you're right. I see what you mean. I think the perception of welding is having, a blowtorch and a pair of goggles, and it's just this repetitive, bloody hell, I'm doing this over and over again. It's dangerous, it's thankless, it's not very well paid, it's manual labor. Whereas you're saying you can make this highly skilled, technology-orientated career, essentially. Exactly. So that does make, which is obviously a lot more attractive to young people. They want to be part of things which are cutting edge, which are exciting, which are going to enrich their career. Do you think it's realistic that people will have robots in their homes soon? Like to do manual tasks around the house. We see futuristic Hollywood films from years ago when everyone had this big people had these big robots in their house doing the washing up and stuff. Is that becoming a reality, Anders? Do you think mass consumer robots, are they going to be in people's homes in the next, say, 10, 15 years?
I think technology in our homes is going to change a lot, especially over the next 10 to 15 years. And already today we are seeing robots like ours being deployed very fast outside of industry. It can be for construction work. I think we're today working together with 6 or 7 like ghost kitchens that have these container-sized kitchens only with robots inside that can be put to small offices. If you're too small to be able to sort of staff up a full-fledged canteen, then you might have your robotic kitchen there taking orders from an app and creating amazing dishes. So already today, these things are happening. I think in our homes, I still believe we have to rethink how technology will be.
Yeah, yeah. It's about affordability, though, isn't it? I mean, people need to be able to afford these robots at the moment are very expensive. What I'm saying, are we going to be able to create these robots at a price point? There's a consumer market for everyday jobs and everyday tasks. Do you see that being realistic within the next 10 to 15 years?
Yes, but I don't believe within the next 10 years, at least, that we will see it materialize as a general purpose robot that does everything that I do. We will see it
Yeah.
with much smarter technologies being everywhere. Of course, we're seeing that the early start with the vacuum cleaners, the lawnmowers, and so on. And of course, that's going to extend to more clever and intelligent devices in our house. And it's gonna take a lot of the technologies that we see from current robotic developments and AI and all that, and augment the things we have. Whereas I think it's a little bit, when you look at the sci-fi movies, people imagine flying cars by now, right? But people didn't imagine smartphones. They didn't imagine generative AI.
Sure, yeah.
So I think like the materialization of technologies often happens in different ways than we imagine. And we've always imagined this humanoid that sort of wakes up and does everything that I would be doing. And I think it will materialize in different ways than that, because there is still a long way to go to be able to mimic everything that humans can do.
This episode was brought to you by Be Digital. Be Digital support leadership teams to optimize cost and get more out of technology investments. Be Digital and the team have unrivaled expertise with technology license management and data remediation, and are therefore perfectly positioned to help prepare organizations for AI technology capability. And on the last point, Be Digital have just developed a cutting-edge AI readiness assessment, which provides tech leaders with a platform they need to make well-informed decisions about AI adoption strategy in 2024 and beyond. Go to bedigitaluk.com to find out more and get in touch. With the ongoing advancements in artificial intelligence and machine learning, how do you envision these technologies shaping the future of robotics and automation?
Well, I think the whole adaptation of AI is going to change a lot of things over the coming years. And of course, there's a big trend around humanoid robotics at the moment, which is really fueled by this AI innovation cycle. There's no doubt that humanoids will still have a long way to go to be able to be this general purpose robotic platform that can solve all kind of things. But there's no doubt that the innovation that it brings along is going to spread to many robotic applications. So I'm really excited that I'm seeing more and more spreading outside of the industrial domain. It's another week between when I talk to a new startup that has an amazing idea about how they can use robotics in construction, in medical applications, in food preparation, in all kind of services. So what I'm excited about is that robotics is 100% moving into mainstream much faster than it's ever been doing before. And I think a key challenge, if I'm going to put on my technology hat, one of the key problems that the robotics industry have always been struggling with is that every problem have been dealt with in a unique way. When you, as a roboticist, you try to solve a problem, there was this tendency to almost starting from scratch, right? We have to build all of this from the bottom up to figure out, and how do we get the knowledge about the domain put into the robot, which really have led to that so many problems have been solved over and over and over again in our industry. With generative AI coming in, we can start now putting all this knowledge about how to do things. We can sort of build this into technological knowledge bases, and we can actually make robot systems that can sort of reuse prior knowledge, prior information, to at least avoiding that we find what I like to call unique solutions to non-unique problems, right? Because that's a little bit what's been going on in the robotic industry, because we did not have the same scale and standardization. And if you were a computer scientist in the software industry and you were thinking about starting a new software project, no one in its right mind will start writing all the software from scratch, right? You would always leverage existing libraries or cloud functions, and actually the layer you would need to put on top to make a real application out of it is quite modest compared to what you would be standing on foundations of. And
Yeah.
the robotic industry is just getting to that point now to where the software industry is, where you can really reuse, leverage so much of information and knowledge. This is really being accelerated by AI. So I think we'll see robotic innovations coming out much faster in the coming years, but there's still a lot of challenges in the real world that we need to solve. So really getting it out robustly to the world is still going to be slower than we dream about, unfortunately, I think.
Yeah, I would imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, that autonomous driving, like the progress made by, for example, Tesla. So I drive a Tesla, and when I you can put it on autonomous driving mode, okay, and it's more assisted driving. Do you know what I mean? But it kind of navigates for you as cruise control sort of thing. I just need to let it know that I'm there every now and again, and it just keeps on going and driving for me. So is that an example of how generative AI and robotics, mechanical robots can work together? Yeah, and how much has the evolution of generative AI in the last couple of years, which has become very popular, I mean, obviously with ChatGPT and things, but what are you excited about in terms of that collaboration between generative AI and robotics? Have you got any case studies recently that spring to mind?
Oh yeah, and I was just home from the NVIDIA GTC conference last week, and just seeing the progress going on there from a research point of view, it's quite amazing. Actually, I think the example you brought forward on autonomous driving, I think is a lesson in technology that we should somehow embrace. Because what I really appreciated by the autonomous driving industry is that they, I guess more than 5 years ago, they came up with this like multiple levels of autonomous driving capabilities, right? Where level 5 is this like fully self-driving autonomous vehicles that I mean, you basically don't have to touch anything. And I think the world has shown us that is quite hard to get to.
Yeah, sure.
Right. We've seen now quite recently a lot of the very well-funded scale-up startups that has really been challenging to reaching that target. I think Tesla is moving their timeline out for when they could be driving fully autonomously as well. But I think that the thinking about, well, there's a number of steps on the ladder to get there, and all of those steps will also be valuable. Is a good way of thinking about things, because it also gives us some opportunities to create real value for the world on our journey to this ultimate goal we'll be heading to. And it's actually a little bit of a shame that we are hearing about all these stories of failures for autonomous driving companies, because a lot of the innovations that they came up with was amazing. But because a lot of the principles around these companies were set out to, well, they had to accomplish level 5 autonomous driving, otherwise the companies would be a failure, is somehow a shame. And I hope we won't repeat that in the robotics industry today. And that's where I see some of the trends on AI is sort of it's all or nothing. You have to sort of either train everything in your big generative AI models, or otherwise you basically created a useless system. When I talk about this with a lot of my research peers, I'm really trying to instill this same thinking about, well, what are these multiple levels? Like, what is level 4 or level 3 in AI generative intelligent robots? Because that's probably technologies that we could take to market today within the next coming years, without being able to sort of show the robot, hey, this is how I'm doing, and then it's going to automatically figure out how to repeat the process that I am doing, and I will be expectant that it can figure everything out. It's a mindset we need to adopt in the robotics industry, because then we can actually stand on the shoulders of all this amazing AI research that comes out and say, well, maybe you'll build out the task, and it can make the robot I have or robot someone else have smarter. It could do some of the things that used to be hard easier, while there's still some of the principles we can stand on the shoulders of. Similar to what you described, like a Tesla self-driving car today, well, it doesn't get you all the way home without you touching anything, but it's still a way less strenuous task. And you can probably imagine you can add capabilities incrementally to that until it actually becomes a really good driving experience.
Yeah, it's not very good around city centers.
No, that's
it's just too. It's obviously a very complex environment. But if you're on a motorway, it's great, because it just guides. It senses the cars around it. It's brilliant. And I mean, I mean, in 10 years, I think, well, maybe even in 5 years, I think there will be autonomous cars on the road, legal driving people everywhere.
100%. I was in California taking one of the Waymos around, and we were just picked up by a completely empty car, and it drove us exactly where we were heading.
wow.
So there's
Really?
yep,
Wow.
it was a great experience. So there's no doubt that we can get there, and these systems are definitely getting there. But even for general purpose driving, imagine if no one was driving any car on the highways. I mean, then you can do all the city driving on your own.
Yeah.
But highways where you actually need to sort of balance speed against the drivers ahead of you to actually get the right throughput through the roads. That's where people get lose attention, starting looking at their phones and whatever they're doing. If we could just solve highway driving in a safe, efficient way, then it will probably be a huge increase of productivity across anything, right? And then we can push out the city driving a few years more.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. In terms of the next 5 to 10 years then, Anders, where do you see the innovation coming from?
I think there's no doubt that all tasks that we know that are flexible, that are what we like to call high mix, low volume, will soon be possible to automate. Right? There's a lot that is already today, and the bar for what is possible to automate will keep falling, because when we can use generative AI, we can use all the ease of use technologies, we can use vision technology in a much more comprehensive way than has been used in industry before. So just making the robot the tool for solving most tasks is sort of just at the cusp of being possible. And there's no doubt that the AI innovations, a lot of the ease of use, process innovations, what we are seeing a lot is also standardization. Just moving robotics away from project thinking, that every time you put a robot anywhere, it's a project where you build everything from scratch. That's a little bit like ordering a carpenter to build your shed in your garden, and it will all be composed of wooden beams and sort of, and of course the carpenter have done that 100 times before, so he knows fairly well how to do it. But imagine having someone that never built something similar to this before, and pulling them in and ask them to, hey, build this. Well, it will go wrong in so many ways.
Sure.
So moving things in where it's more standardized, where, I mean, the shed analogy in your garden, well, you can have building construction kits, right, where everything is pre-cut, prepared, it's been deployed 100 times before, and maybe the small design flaws that it had in the beginning has been ironed out. I think getting to that state in hardware, where robotic systems that goes to factories are no longer prototypes. It's actually productized, hardened, things that's been accomplished before.
Scalable.
Basically. Yes. Yeah. And that's where then the AI can come in and help customize these scalable solutions to the uniqueness that always is in manufacturing processes and so on. But there's no doubt, especially when it comes to hardware, that having a bit of standardization is going to help increase speed. And standardization can sound so boring because it doesn't have to be committee standardization, right? It's more like productization, basically. That things need to be hardened, field-proven ways of solving categories of problems or categories of tasks, like welding or logistics picking, right? If you need to pick all these different parcels that looks different, well, there's no need to redesign again and again tooling, technologies to do that.
Yeah, sure. No, that makes sense. Okay, brilliant. So I wanted to bring it back to yourself, Anders. You know, you work for one of the most successful robotics companies in the world in a senior leadership role. How do you achieve balance in your life, and how do you stay productive? What advice could you give to the listeners to, you know, in terms of productivity and balance?
I think it's always hard, and especially in fast-growing businesses, there's no doubt that everything will be busy and hectic. Tough questions needs to be answered in a very short period of time. And when you're in sort of that hyper-growth phase that Universal Robots have also been in, then I think if you, that's our own experience, and also if you look through literature, there's no doubt that it will be tough, and it will feel slightly chaotic at times. So I think the personal way of managing that is you really have to thrive in that. You have to sort of create your structure and order in it. And you also have to find a way to generate focus, not only for yourself, but also for your teams, in order to them to really sort of make progress of not just being consumed in that. So I think personally, I like both exercising, getting some fresh air. I have a dog, walking with the dog and so on. It's really sort of helpful to just clear out, but also spending the time with the family, making sure you sort of draw the line, because there's no doubt there's demand for your attention 24/7. So you have to somehow draw the line, find your time.
Can I ask you, Anders, just about innovation? Obviously, you've been the head of innovation, and obviously you're now the VP of strategy and innovation. Just for technology leaders or leaders of product development and R&D teams, how do you keep that culture of innovation evolving in your organization? Do you know what I mean? How do you ensure that you are always being innovative within your team?
Yeah, so at Universal Robots, we learned this very deliberately 5 or 6 years ago, and that was actually one of the reasons I was brought into the company, is really finding that balance, because there's no doubt in any technology company today, one very difficult thing, but also very, very important things is delivery. I mean, you have to deliver on, because I mean, you can have the best ideas in the world, but if those ideas never make it to customers, it in the end you'll run out of time or money or anything. So first of all, you need to deliver, and Universal Robots have really been focusing on making that happen. But at the same other side, you need to come up with the great ideas. You need to create those ideas, and we've been very deliberate around having that proper balance, both allocating the time, allocating the resources, but even using and circulating our best engineers into processes where they can help come up with the greatest ideas, but then also transferring them back and into sort of taking those ideas to market. And I think that's also a way of keeping everyone in the engineering organization, in the product organization, in a place where we have a few number of people that really looks at the future technologies. We are really working with our engineers. We have hackathons. We have sort of innovation projects where we have engineers working on the state-of-the-art technologies, validating, is it ready yet? How do we do it? But then also decide on which ones do we push and execute and take to market as well. And I think any company, sort of technology company, needs to find that balance of when to do both. And it's hard, right? It's so easy to be consumed in what will happen in the future. And it's also really easy to be consumed in something that's very incremental, because of course there's many ideas that comes in from the market, or for the ones working directly with the products in market. They could be thinking about how to improve the products as they are today. But you still have to find that balance. I'm sure that in any automotive company, there's plenty of ideas of how to improve cars that doesn't involve self-driving. But you somehow have to find that balance between bringing in the new state-of-the-art technologies, but also having really brilliant products in as well.
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah, no, that's a brilliant answer. Okay. Yeah, no, thank you for that, Anders. So looking back on your career, and I know you're a young man and you've got plenty of time left, but looking back now, what advice would you give to your 21-year-old self?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I actually think the best advice I could give myself is to seek more inspiration from the industry and sort of the leaders who made it really well. I think that getting some of those sort of leadership fundamentals, thought leadership fundamentals in early would really sort of help you think about in which way do I want to involve myself as I grow. And it is not, I'm not hereby sort of arguing that everyone needs to have a leadership aspiration, because I think there's amazing careers in technology and development and so on. But it's more to build yourself in how do you sort of have a proper view of the future of now. And I think there's so many inspirational leaders out there, both on how you think about products, product evolution, product innovation, things about development and so on. So really seeking that inspiration early, I think would actually put a different perspective to your career, which can be quite sort of baffling when you're young. Where will that lead me? But thinking about the inspirational leaders out there, and also seeking mentorship early, figuring out like who in the organizations that you then venture into when you're out of university and so on, which is really the inspirational leaders, which ones would you really love to learn more from, and then actively seeking that.
Do you have anyone you look up to, any idols, or if you could have a coffee with anyone in the world, who would it be, Anders?
Oh yeah, it's a really interesting question to ask. So again, there's so many amazing people in the industry of robotics, right? There's a number of iconic people like Mark Rybert, who led Boston Dynamics.
Of course.
I've always been a fan of the work as a person like Dieter Fox, who's really been the robotic leader, both sort of doing a lot for autonomous driving. Now he's setting up robotics research at NVIDIA. It's an amazing career on the technology side, and always sort of keeping at the forefront of thinking the balance between innovation and technology. There's no doubt that a lot of the product innovation leaders, and that's anything from Steve Jobs to Marty Kagan, some of those. I'm so fortunate to have a person on my team today that worked directly with Steve Jobs in the early Apple days, and sort of just hearing the stories from and sharing that inspiration. It's amazing. So there's been a lot of great eras on technology. So many inspirational people, I think, to learn from in that era.
So you got to pick one, Anders. Who are you going to pick? You got a 30-minute coffee with anyone in history. Who are you going to go for?
Oh, that's hard. It's really, really hard. Well, then I want to go with Steve Jobs. I think that's almost a too easy answer, but
I think I could probably understand why. A fascinating figure in terms of design and stuff. I think that would be a good answer.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating, and there's no doubt that at Universal Robots we take a lot of inspiration from Apple, the way Apple's been thinking about products, and the whole thing about simplicity. In the end, of taking state-of-the-art technology, because there's no doubt that moving technology products forward, it needs state-of-the-art technology. It's hard technological problems that need to be solved, and on the other hand, you need to find ways to make that very accessible to people. And I think Steve Jobs there is a really good figure of a person that really managed to take state-of-the-art innovations in terms of technology, but also really making it useful for people in the end, and bringing an ecosystem together around that. So I think I've got to go with that.
Got to go with Jobs. Yeah, okay, good answer. So let's end on this one then. Are there any books you've read recently, or pieces of content or papers you've read, anything that's inspired you in the last 6 months?
Yeah, I recently read the book called The White Lens. And The White Lens is all about, and there's no doubt that Universal Robots is a bit of a platform and ecosystem company, right? There's so many people using...
The White Lens, you said, yeah?
The White Lens, yeah. And it's all about when you do innovations to really think about the ecosystem where your innovations and products end up. Like, is it actually ready? Is the surrounding... I mean, when we bring along a collaborative robot to the world, well, is there anyone ready to actually use it? Will there be any sort of fundamental barriers for adopting the technologies and so on? Which, when you look at the really fast scaling, adopting successes of a lot of new emerging technologies, then it's really all about, well, is the world ready? And it doesn't need to be ready, but you need to be thinking about who in the world will be the users, the person in need of your product, who would be ready, and if they're ready, is all the business relationships around them ready for the thing, whether the way that they're heading.
Yeah.
And I think that's such an important way of thinking about innovation, that it's not just about creating the next new tech product. It is also to really find, how do you make tech products that will change the world for the people who get it, and find ways where there's actually people waiting for that innovation that you make available as well.
Sure. So that's The Wide Lens by Ron Adner then, yeah?
Yes, exactly.
No, that's fantastic. So, Anders, thank you so much for coming on the Tech Leaders podcast. It's been a fascinating conversation, and thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome, Gareth. It was been a pleasure.
What a great conversation. As I mentioned in the introduction, it's always a pleasure to engage with true experts in their respective fields, and today's discussion with Anders certainly underscored that. There were many insightful points covered, actually, and personally, I was quite struck by Anders' response to the concern around jobs displacement by robots. The emphasis on the welding profession was particularly fascinating. It was quite remarkable to discover the pronounced scarcity of talent within such a well-established industry to start with. But in essence, it seems that while welding might not be the most appealing career choice for many young people, seemingly, integrating robotics into the process could help bridge this talent gap and make traditional vocations like welding more appealing, because it kind of maybe makes the role a little bit different for what young people want to do these days. Time will tell, I suppose, but this was just one of the many interesting points that Anders made. It's discussions like these that truly broaden our perspective. And yeah, it was just a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please Don't forget to give us a subscribe, a like, or even a review. It really helps us loads. We've got some incredible guests coming up. Thank you so much for supporting the show.
Please don't forget to subscribe to the Tech Leaders Podcast.
This episode was brought to you by Be Digital. Be Digital support leadership teams to optimize cost and get more out of technology investments. Be Digital and the team have unrivaled expertise with technology license management and data remediation, and are therefore perfectly positioned to help prepare organizations for AI technology capability. And on the last point, Be Digital have just developed a cutting-edge AI readiness assessment, which provides tech leaders with a platform they need to make well-informed decisions about AI adoption strategy in 2024 and beyond. Go to Be Digital UK to find out more and get in touch.